The events of 9/11 dramatically changed our nation. But what happened on that day was not an isolated incident. The global war on terror was preceded by other acts of violence against us. Today, this war has expanded to another front, the information domain. Now, these are just a handful of the enemy's 6,500 websites connecting extremists around the globe. Their ultimate goal? To create a world where basic human rights and democratic freedoms are forbidden. And the enemy is good. This is the enemy's video game. To play, you become a member of an extremist death squad. You score points, you kill American soldiers. Now, who's the demographic for this video game? I would offer the middle class and upper middle class in places like Baghdad, Cairo, Damascus, perhaps recruits in Los Angeles, Detroit, and Northern Virginia. This is how the enemy reaches out to the next generation. This is a satellite television station in the Middle East, where 24/7, 365, you can watch Americans being killed in real life. This is no video game. It's unspeakable for us, but it's a great recruiting tool for the enemy.
I'm standing under the flight path of American Airlines Flight 77. On September 11, 2001, 5 men armed with knives and box cutters hijacked that aircraft and crashed it into the Pentagon, killing 64 people aboard and another 125 inside the building. Those deaths added to the total of 2,998 that day and brought us directly into what we consider an era of persistent conflict. Now, you and I know all about the direct fight in this persistent conflict, but the other big fight is going on in the information domain. And that's a fight we have to join and a fight we have to win.
For starters, the people we're fighting on the information domain have no rules. Truth doesn't matter to them. Manipulating the media is standard procedure. In the words of the number 2 Al-Qaeda leader, more than half the battles in this war are being fought in the media. And right now, the enemy is on the attack.
Just my opinion, but I would say the enemy understands the importance of communicating to audiences better than we do. Historically, when it comes to getting the word out in a way that connects America to the Army, that tells our story, sometimes we've been successful, sometimes we haven't.
During World War II, Hollywood, and one officer in particular, got it right. As the war raged, he knew the Army needed the nation's support, so he found a way to change the way Americans understood the nature of the fight. His name was Frank Capra. You know him from movies like It's a Wonderful Life. But Capra also made films for the War Department.
Initially, these films were intended to tell soldiers why they were asked to fight, but they ended up being shown in theaters all across America to inform and educate the public, and they worked. Here's a clip.
What are these two worlds of which Mr. Wallace spoke? The free and the slave. Let's take the free world first. Our world. How did it become free? Only through a long and unceasing struggle inspired by men of vision. Moses, Muhammad, Confucius, Christ. All believe that in the sight of God, all men were created equal.
This is not a product public affairs would produce today. Many took the message to heart. During World War II, America rallied behind our soldiers and the fight.
Leading up to our entry into the war.
In Korea, we lost the momentum we had in World War II.
Senior military leaders gagged the media by imposing formal censorship, with reporters forbidden to criticize military tactics and failures in leadership. The idea that we shouldn't communicate with the public took hold. As a result, little was written on what would become known as the Forgotten War.
A day in Vietnam.
Then came the full-spectrum conflict of Vietnam, where soldiers did everything from nation building to counterinsurgency to sweeping operational campaigns with full-pitched battles. We started that conflict seeking public support, generally reaching out to the media to tell our story. Unfortunately, what began well didn't last.
The so-called First Television War brought the battlefield into America's living rooms.
And it is this lesson that has brought us to Vietnam.
For many Americans, the only truth in black and white was what was reported and the images on their TV screens. As the government, including the military, became less than honest with the media about the war, our Army lost its credibility.
Sadly, the institutional scar tissue from Vietnam on a generation of soldiers and leaders included a culture of non-engagement, where we avoided the press, and communication was defined as press releases and official statements.
Have we learned our lesson? It's time to look in the mirror. In the global war on terrorism, we're fighting a war that combines counterinsurgency, nation building, force on force, just like Vietnam. And we're losing on the information front, where the enemy has the edge. Extremist recruits are responding to the enemy's call to action. Yet here in America, there's a growing disconnect between the Army's and the public's understanding of what's needed to win. As a result, fewer Americans are volunteering to serve. To turn that around, we need to improve how we get our story out to the American public.
The greatest weapon we have in our arsenal for this asymmetric fight is the American soldier. And in the 21st century, spokesman is part of the job description.
Everyone in the Army needs to tell America why we serve and what we've accomplished. And that means everyone, every soldier, every Army civilian, every spouse, every veteran. And human interest stories have the greatest impact.
Is this the new one?
Reggie Mouton's an Army medic. Michael Mouton is a first sergeant. Alan Mouton is too, all preparing to head to Iraq in a few weeks.
You chose to go together.
Yes.
We'd be right there on the same camp.
One of us could request to be in another location, but we wouldn't have it no other way.
We've always been close, and we'll always be close.
They know it is hard for their mother. As close as they are to each other, they're closer to her still.
Oh, please.
I definitely love my mom. We are her priorities.
She's always been my role model.
And I think we strive hard to make her proud because of the things that she's sacrificed and the things that she's done.
The men they have become is a source of real pride for her and anguish.
I would give my life for them any second. I would go to Iraq and do their jobs if it was possible and leave them here.
She wants them to know their mother's love goes with them. Erin Hayes, ABC News, Fort Hood, Texas.
The media didn't know about the Mouton brothers, but some good first sergeant, some good company commander did, and they told them about them. Look, part of communicating to the American public is identifying those incredible human interest stories that you and I often take for granted.
Being a general does nothing to ease the anguish of having a son badly wounded in battle and getting a phone call he's being medevaced to Germany.
He said, you need to go now.
Meaning that he might not make it?
Yeah.
When Brigadier General James Barclay got to Germany, he was greeted by a close friend and fellow general. Barclay knew all about war. He'd spent 18 months in Iraq, but now it was personal.
She grabbed me and she said, you know, you're not a general anymore. And she goes, you're a dad.
And then you go see him.
It's hard. You know, it's hard to see your son. But the best thing was, you know, he was alive.
Do you regret having followed in your father's footsteps?
I don't regret it. I don't regret that this happened to me, because if it hadn't happened to me, it would have happened to someone else. And I don't want to put that on, I wouldn't put that on anyone.
It's a level of commitment few families on the home front can match, putting your own flesh and blood on the line.
We all pay a great deal of attention to the national media, but we've got to engage the local media as well to connect with soldiers, their families, and the grassroots level of the American public who reads the local press. The local media has high impact. You know who else reads the local paper? Congress and their staff.
As Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. We all take local newspapers. We all know what's in them, and we all know the mood of the people we're blessed to represent. And consequently, if there's a local positive story, either at a post or a base back in our district, we know about it.
We've talked a lot about the press, but in order to get the most truthful and accurate information out, we need to tell it directly to the public. Look, we enjoy the incredible support of the American people. In order to keep it that way, they need to hear from us.
Go local. Reach out and contact America. And America lives in our small towns, our cities, our suburbs, and farms. America's in the homes of our friends and neighbors, in our communities, in our places of worship, and in our veteran service organizations. That's where you'll find soldiers like Chris Matson explaining their service to the public.
An opportunity that I had just this past Sunday was to speak about my experience in Iraq, and in this particular case, my experience in working with the Iraqi people. And it was something that I had a couple of folks come up to me and say, you know, we've watched the news, we've never heard anything like what you've just told us, and it was absolutely fascinating. And it caught me off guard, and I guess when you take it in that perspective, there are tens of thousands of American soldiers that have tremendous stories that they can share with those folks around them that will probably enlighten them and open their eyes.
As good as our soldiers are at telling America why we fight and all we've accomplished, there simply isn't a better spokesperson for sacrifice than an Army spouse.
And we'd like you, Army spouses, to tell your Army story. Talk about your soldier, what you've learned being a part of the Army family, and how you feel about service and sacrifice.
I wish America could take the time to really see what the military, what the soldiers on a day-to-day basis are trying to do over there, where the good is coming from, the little steps that they make, and try to see the positive.
Right. Now that we've gone through and secured the area, now more people are feeling safe to come out.
It's hard to get it out in the media, but they believe they're doing a good thing, and we do too. We want them home, but we also want them to be able to do what they're doing.
The story of our soldiers and their spouses is the story of America and American values.
If you come to the nation's capital, you'll see lots of memorials to great men. Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln. They made their mark against great odds because of their values. We embody the same values today. The Army values are America's values. And what of our adversaries' values? Their values are very different from ours. They have a total disregard for innocent life and personal freedom.
The global war on extremism and terror is a 21st century battle of ideals for basic freedoms like freedom of speech and freedom of religion. It just might be the one who wins this battle is the one who communicates best. As soldiers, we have to communicate the values on which our country was founded.
There are strong signals.
We see the media as helping us do this. They're embedded with us on the front lines in combat and communications. Today, journalists are part of going to war.
What I need from public affairs people is access. That's the big thing. They're the ones that can break through and get me out to where I need to get the story. The stories that I've reported as an embedded reporter have not always been complimentary of the military. Sometimes bad stuff happens, and you have to report that. You have to. The reaction of the units I've been embedded with to sort of bad news stories has been unexpected. That is, they're really angry at first. It was the kind of anger where they'd be saying, you know, did you have to write that? Yeah, I did. But then they say, okay, well, it was fair and accurate. You know, we deserved it. And we went on from there.
We would like to hear your view, General Dempsey.
Providing access to the press and ensuring they tell our story truthfully and accurately is not just the responsibility of public affairs officers. Everyone in the Army family, including senior leaders, needs to start or continue communicating directly with the American people.
The news media doesn't do a perfect job of putting things in perspective and providing all the information that people need, so they go to a lot of different sources. And that's where I think it's really important for the Army to work with the news media, particularly the news media that has a reputation for having an historical basis of working in accuracy and trying to put things in context. And to the extent that the Army is dealing with the press in a straightforward way, in a way that that helps us understand what the Army is doing, I mean, everybody benefits.
We have to tell our story to the American public. We must communicate. We owe it to those who made the ultimate sacrifice to explain to America why we are willing to do the same. And we owe it to those they left behind. Listen to young David Smith.
Must be really proud of your dad.
Yeah. Talking about losing your father is brave too. But David told us why it was so important.
I'm doing this to help out all the kids who've lost a father or mother in the war.
How do you think this will help them?
When I speak out and I'm on the news, they'll probably see me, that I've lost a father, then they'll feel better because they'll see that they're not the only one who's lost somebody.
Young David Smith isn't afraid to speak out, is he? And he's one of the reasons why we fight. He represents the future. Look, in the fight for the information domain, we have to tell our story to win. It's an operational requirement that we speak directly to the American public, tell them all we're doing and why we serve. The image of the Army and the will of the American people to support us is in our hands.